doing anything on the budget, on the, getting the DMV bill out this week?
No, when are we gonna get that
We
DMV
need to
bill out?
get, it
Yeah,
seems to me, we need to put that in.
Wanda, we gotta get the miscellaneous bill. What are we doing? Anything?
Yeah, where are we with that? I mean, the deal was done, right?
Well, I thought she was coming back with a couple of
Yeah.
Well,
changes.
she's gonna be here this morning. Let's
So
ask
I
her
think
what's going on.
Okay.
We may need to think about putting that ahead of the list.
That's what I thought. I thought we could get
Yeah.
this thing moving. If it's ready to go, we should have it out by now. Yeah, let's Wanda's coming in. I see this morning, so we'll figure out what's going on. Okay, we are live. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. It's Wednesday, February 15th. The month is half gone. And we're going to start off this morning with the town highway grant programs. And we have a couple of guests with us this morning, Joel and Bradley. And who would like to take the lead this morning, or both of you, whatever. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning. We get set up here. So for the record, I'm Bradley Kuchenberger. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Agency of Transportation. With me is Joel Pergo, who's the Program Manager for a number of areas, including the town highway grant programs that we've been discussing today. So in particular, we're talking about town highway structures and town highway Class 2 roadway grants.
I think we've been doing very well with the towns the last few years, and great towns. I think they're doing well themselves and trying to get some other projects going.
Okay, we're muted. Now I'm going to put up the document that is on that I sent to Mike yesterday, so it's probably on there.
Should we look at one of the tabs?
No, so I'm here to talk specifically about how kind of the funding for these programs works as compared to the expenditures. There's some concern relative to the level of commitment that we have to funding the town highway structures and Class 2 roadway program, given that in this year's big bill, we chose to do it in the big bill this year, but in this year's big bill, there'll be reversions in each of these programs, and we wanted to talk a little bit about that. And
Well, we had big reversions in the BAA.
what were they in the BAA?
Yes.
Yes.
And actually, Chris Roop came in and explained how that was working, and that was rather than carrying those anticipated costs, they were being reverted
Okay.
back to the T fund, and then you would pay, you make the payments based on when you had to make the expenditure.
Exactly.
And so it was a way of cleaning up all those obligations or that were in that category. So that's the BAA, and then the two big ones were structures and class 2 town highway Class 2.
Would you like a copy of some of the grants, roadway projects and structures?
So what I've prepared
No,
is really a reassurance that we do award all of our appropriated amounts in a given year. But the nature of the projects is such that there's a more extended time between when we award grants and when those expenditure obligations come due as their reimbursement programs. So we wanted to come in and further reassure the committee that all of the reversions that we've requested are, one, in line with our historical operation of these programs, and that they don't hold any of the town grants that we've awarded in any jeopardy. So,
And the other part of that is not making the subject, the reversion subject to the reserve requirements. That's all in the BAA.
yes,
And this committee reviewed it last week, because we wanted to, because the natural question is, well, are you cutting money to the towns? And
exactly.
the answer was no, that it is a way of actually having, like we would do with capital construction projects, having the expenditure aligning when that expenditure is anticipated to be made with the award. So it's there, it's all done.
Right.
I only have to convince everybody to pass the BAA.
Beautiful.
Is there,
So that was really my intent of coming in. I don't know if there's any questions, but what I've provided is data summarizing the appropriations, the number of awards, in this column, project allotment, how many dollars have been allotted to municipal grant projects in those given years for those programs. And then you see the current year expenditures, which is always quite significantly less than the total appropriation in the project allotment. And then beyond that, I've given you the project detail for FY 21, 22, and 23 for these two programs, which shows the amount that each town highway project was awarded, the total estimated project cost, and the actual expenditure.
Would you like copies of the committee anyway? Well, I have copies.
Thank you, Chair. I got it.
Senator Burchett, you had a question?
Yeah, so you're doing this basically kind of switching to a cash accounting.
That's
For
right.
these two, are there other grant programs, or these are the only two grant programs, so these are the only two programs you're doing it for?
These are the only grant programs that specifically align with this type of cash accounting. Simply because they're reimbursement programs. So the much larger town highway aid program is a formula grant that is, so that's, I think in this year, 28 million, that's a block grant, and we make those expenditures quarterly. But this program in particular is always kind of in arrears because you're awarding and then paying when those obligations come due. I mean, I think in fiscal year 23, for example, we have projects ranging back to fiscal year 2017 that we're waiting on to reimburse while also keeping current with whatever bills come in.
It was just a decision by OT that thought this was a better way to do things.
Right, so instead of leaving that balance in the appropriation, we know based on the data we have and the awards we made that we can invest that cash now while also being able to meet our future obligations given the long-term outlay of this program. I think fiscal year 21 is a good example of that. So we paused the program in fiscal year 21 for both class 2 and structures because of budget constraints. However, there was still small appropriations to cover the previous fiscal year's commitments. So if there was ever a period of time hypothetically where this program was finished, there would have to be a last final year to appropriate a tail to the program too.
And then we to cover some of that because we had paused it and we put another $3 million in.
we made it up, we doubled
Right.
it the next year.
Yes, so you can see in fiscal year 22, there was a small appropriation to cover the commitments that we had made in 20 and prior. And then in 22, we doubled each of those programs to a much significant, level. And then in 23, I think in fiscal year 22, also there was language amending the minimum amount available and the formula comprising how to calculate the amount available for these programs, which we've met in 23 and 24 moving forward. And we do award every dollar that is appropriated. In some cases, we award more, slightly more than is appropriated. And then the projects go about their way, and we're always kind of in balance, if you will, but in the long run. So,
Questions?
questions?
No, the committee's way ahead.
Yeah, you guys are way
I bet you
ahead.
didn't know Chris came in last week.
I monitored a bit of the testimony, but I saw this show up on the calendar, and I knew this was a topic of discussion of the last couple of weeks between the two committees and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and wanted to make sure that everyone was in full assurance that we award every dollar we are appropriated and we pay every commitment that we make.
We're closer to the League of Cities and Towns. Is that something that they're concerned about, or they involved in making these decisions?
They raised a concern with their constituency group when they saw the scale of the reversion. And really, it isn't a practice that we were taking that's outside of the norm. But because the appropriation in fiscal year 22 was so much bigger, I think it had a bit of a disproportionate.
Those were large figures, and it
They're
gave
large
the impression
figures.
that somehow we were
Yeah,
taking money away, reducing the level of funding to the.
so really, I think it was a misunderstanding that I think moving forward, we'd be able to work more proactively with them to make sure there's no big surprises of that nature.
Surprised we don't have a lot of interaction with the interest committee.
We come in once a
When it
year.
comes in,
When there's problems, we hear
we hear from them.
on that, whenever we get to the
The only thing, grant,
time.
well, the grant program was
Yeah.
always an issue, but we increased that every year. So we're 26 million now or something. like
Haven't
that.
we not stand the legislation, the statutory requirement before?
Oh, to the towns?
Is there a formula that how that's calculated?
That's town highway
The
eight.
town
Yeah.
highway.
That's just the mileage.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
The
talking
other is
grant.
structure and
Yeah.
road.
That's at 27 million this year.
Yeah, it's around $28 million.
Yeah.
What we did this year is that's based on a formula. There's two options. One is you can use a calculation based on the prior two closed fiscal years and the difference between them and come up with an inflationary amount, which is what we chose to do, or you can use the consumer price index all urban for that period
Is
of
that
time.
by your choice or that's what's in statute? I thought there was something in statute saying this is how it shall be.
It's whatever the lower amount is.
Of those two.
Yeah. I believe it sounds written.
So I think we've just level funded a couple of my first 2 years.
I believe that was the case.
So we had to notwithstand the.
In previous years, there has been notwithstanding language. This year, that is not the case.
We have money now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've, I think the overall increase to our town highway program offerings across the board is approximately 10% increase compared to last year. A big portion of that is in the town highway bridge program, but
That's federally matched.
those are federal aid projects that.
That's where our money is. It's
That's
not,
the
it's
state.
not in the T fund revenues.
Right.
It's the federal.
So if you do think of any questions, please reach out. Otherwise,
We're still gonna have to address sooner or later the replacement of the gas tax.
Tomorrow morning.
We're gonna start talking about that, because that's an interest that's, we want to encourage electric, but on the other hand, we gotta figure out a way to capture some of that.
Was it $3 million that they estimated with what was on for electric vehicles, that they estimated the lost revenue? It was like,
No, it's very tiny. Right
how was
now.
that $3 million?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's a few $100,000.
Okay.
I'm sure Wanda can tell us, but.
Oh, for electric vehicles?
Yeah, in other words,
It was
if
a couple
we're not-
$100,000 a couple years ago. I can't imagine it's changed.
Too much. Yeah.
Maybe it's better.
Might be.
I know purchase use tax is up considerably because of people bought overpriced vehicles.
Mhm.
Used vehicles were very high priced. That was a good time, but
There's no used cars, people are buying new cars.
that's right. And there was, so that's coming down. That's going to be dropping, I'm sure, because the market is dropping on used vehicles. Should have sold yours. It was high priced.
I buy them and I use them. And I keep them.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Right.
What year was that Cavalier?
You
92?
have anything for us? You have anything for us? Okay. All right, Wanda's here in a few minutes. And ask her about, I think up at this point, we had some confirmations yesterday. And Mike, you want to give us an update, Mike? Go ahead and check that out.
I sent out an email to both chairs or support people for those two boards. The Transportation Board I just heard back from, that one is a new appointment to the board, so it's the full process. The other three on the travel, or whatever it is, are all renewal of terms that they've been doing, and they're very valued members of the
What would you wish to do?
I think we should talk to the new person on the T board,
Okay,
because the role of the board is,
okay, so we'll do that. Now, what about the other three?
well, they're,
You have the list, you give it to us.
John
You took it
Roberts.
back, yeah.
So as long as they're currently serving,
No, I think that's good. We should do that. But just have that list.
Invite for this, I needed to project.
did.
Through the mix, so.
Wytham?
Almost.
You ever remember the pace?
Oh, yeah, oh, sure.
I was talking to my brothers last night about their old cars, and one of my brothers had a pacer.
No kidding.
I'm like, "Oh, that weird bubble back.
Yeah, I had it, one of my son had one years and years ago. And it was just a cheap car.
Yeah, yeah.
And he worked for me one summer. He had a little pace that he go down the driveway with.
Right. So I think at the time it was considered like,
AMC, that's what they call it, AMC. I'm trying to think of the name they had before it. Yeah. They were quite a car.
Yeah.
What company was that?
I think it was GM.
Was it
I think it
GM?
was a sub-brand.
I always remember the big glass on the windows.
Yeah, it was like all glass.
All glass, yeah.
My brother lived in Arizona. He said it was a bad car for Arizona because it would get so hot because it was like.
Oh, yeah, all the glass.
Greenhouse.
Yeah. What year was that?
This is a 76.
So they were that late, yeah.
Or no, yes, 76.
Yeah.
My brother had this station wagon. They had,
Oh, did they have a station wagon?
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
well, that's what they called it, a station wagon.
Right,
I'll show you
yeah.
a picture of it. It's not really.
People would know what a station wagon is
Yeah.
today.
He had this one with the.
Oh, yeah, I never saw one of those, no. I always just saw the car. Yeah, it was a station wagon.
It was just a little bit.
Remember the original station wagons had the wood, the real wood.
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was something back then. Yeah, it had a real wood.
Is there a place to plug in over there?
Yes, thank you.
We're just taking a 5-minute break until 9:30, and then we'll continue our discussion with motor vehicle modernization. Wanda, you're with us?
Lisa Goffin.
Lisa, okay, you're with us too, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Wanda's with us this morning,
I think so.
okay. She's supposed to be here. I
She
hope.
said she might come, but she didn't want to testify.
We gotta find out what she wants to do on the,
I sent her an email.
okay, yeah, we gotta get this wrapped up. I don't know what we're waiting for.
Ingles here.
Ingalls sits here, but he just wanted to go get coffee, so.
All right, so.
Core modernization project status update.
That's right.
All right.
So you're the consultant doing that big project?
Yeah, well, I'm not, I'm the JFO monitoring,
Oh,
the IT consultant. So
so you're a
I'm your
consultant
voice.
from JFO, but JFO hired you as a consultant?
Well, I'm a contractor, but I replaced Dan Smith, the IT consultant, to advise the legislature to be a separate voice, advising you on IT issues.
On all IT issues.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
the start, so
Yeah.
and explain what I do.
Who are
I haven't been here yet.
All right.
Are you coming with a budget, Jane?
Budget adjustment, well, our goal is to have it out.
That was a good move to take out that 9 million, do it in a regular talk. Yeah, because that's a lot of money to throw out without.
It hasn't been vetted. It hasn't been
Well, that's
vetted.
what I'm saying. With my issue on that is if you do it this year, is that a continuing?
Well, they need to be able to evaluate whether this is something that's gonna save lives.
That's right, yeah. Otherwise, if it's just a one-time deal. Next year, they'll be in the same situation. So that's a good thought there.
I'm surprised the House didn't.
Ryan's a new chair, she's got a new committee. And the other thing, I'm not sure you should have a public hearing on the budget. For everybody.
Right, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That trash can, you're
Oh,
way
she's
over
got
mine.
two.
It must be almost done in that.
Today,
Oh, today.
Chair can wrangle our members.
You're new members, right?
Yeah, we.
The minds.
And do-
Maybe David or.
Like vice chair, he's almost in charge.
Oh.
I didn't know if part of my job was to nudge Sears when he starts to doze off. Yesterday, he
Oh,
was.
no, he really was tired. You think about driving that drive up in the morning.
Is he doing now overnight?
And he goes home. And Zoom center.
I ordered a Red Sox hat for him, so I'll get that.
Relax.
Okay, we are live, ready to go again. Welcome, everyone. We are going to continue our discussion this morning. And we are talking to the Department of Motor Vehicle Modernization. And we have Lisa Gavin.
Got it.
Okay, welcome. And why don't you give us an update of what you're doing?
Well, I'm bringing
Okay.
up my presentation.
All right, thank you.
Margaret's coming as well.
Why, she's here on schedule. Why is she here?
It's because she didn't want to present. She wasn't.
I wish these people would notify us, and I don't like that. They don't show up.
Okay.
I think where we are. Lisa, as a start, hopefully for the other committee members to describe what your role is.
Yeah,
because,
that's what I asked.
Yeah, just, bringing up, there we
She's the
go.
new Dan Smith.
That's right.
Not, some may not know Dan Smith, but it was, and I can kind of do this because it came out of joint fiscal committee, and that was with all the money that goes into IT projects and somewhat of our rocky history, we felt that the legislature needed to have some assistance, and it really came out of institutions when you were asked to fund some IT projects in the capital bill. And people were saying, we just need some help here and some expertise to feel comfortable that this is a project that, that is going to succeed. And so we hired someone to provide that consultation on an as-needed basis to the Joint Fiscal Office to support the legislature. And so Dan Smith retired, and Lisa was hired to replace Dan and to provide that expertise to us, to the legislature, because we hear from the administration, they have their, but it gives us a chance to have that independent kind of examination. Or there can be times when we said, would you check this out? You know?
When was he hired? When was that position
Yeah.
created?
Oh, goodness, I would say maybe 5-6 years ago. It was back when institutions was doing a lot of the IT and Peg Flory was chair. And so that might have been 6 years ago at least.
I think it was 2016. I believe.
Well, that would be about 6 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Okay, Lisa, why don't you give us an update of what you're doing and tell us all about it?
Great. For the record, my name is Lisa Govan. I'm the IT consultant with the Joint Fiscal Office. Just to introduce myself, since this is my first time here, I have a lot of experience within state government, but also in the private sector. I served as, my whole career, I've been in IT. I served as IT director at the Department of Education when it was a department. And I led some large IT projects, which were successful. The first student data warehouse was successful. I moved into the private sector where I served as an enterprise project architect, which means I led and designed implementations for state governments for a line of business software company, think license, permitting, grants, that type of thing. So I worked with Massachusetts, Colorado, Connecticut. I did large projects for federal home loan banks who were working on a common application. So I had a lot of experience there. And then I went out on my own and I led a project at the Agency of Education at that point. And I was really the technical lead looking after the state's best interests for this project, which was the implementation of a student information system at the state level that would automate the data transfers from the school districts to the state, and that's live and successful. So now I started a year ago in October, as Senator Kitchen mentioned, replacing Dan Smith. So this is from one of the first reviews that I did from last year, which is for the core modernization project. And so just as an overview, this project consists of 2 phases. The first one being vehicle services, which is being implemented right now. And the next one is the driver services. So the vehicle services include title registration, the things that are listed on the screen. And the next phase, which starts later this year, includes driver's license, other identifications, really the customer-facing e-services for the general people. Yes.
Go ahead.
Will it impact any other web-based programs they have? So like my town clerk often complains about the town highway posting web interface and how it seems like it was written in COBOL 82 or something.
It has a lot of different interfaces. I'm trying to remember. I think it was something.
I didn't know it's just like absolutely everything would be affected, or there's some parts that would remain.
I would have to believe everything. I mean, there were something like 22 integrations that they have to do with other systems. It's a very large project. So it does impact a lot. Everything from the dealers to, I'm sure how your town goes.
Will there be more phases? I mean, one of the things we learned is you have to chunk it. And before, we had these huge systems, and if one part didn't move forward, everything fell apart. And so are there multiple phases beyond 1 and 2?
Well, they're chunked together within those phases, but these are the broader phases.
Okay.
And as I'll get into I think one of the keys to success for this system is the vendor. They've had successful projects in I think it's 16, it's on my slide. We'll move forward. In 16 other states, and they have their proven approach to implementation. And I think one of the keys that I'll get to is that our leadership really chose to follow that exactly. They didn't want to deviate from something that had been proven in so many different states. And it came in not just on time in the other states, but on budget as well, which is extraordinary. So
That was another mistake that was made in the past.
okay.
And we gotta have our own, because we're unique. And then that gets into a lot of complexity, and then you don't have the benefit of a proven technology. So that was one of the other conclusions in terms of why we'd had past failure. And the third one was the competence and the quality of your leadership team in the administrative department. I just want you to know I learned the lessons because they were painful in terms of failed systems. And so those were the things that have really, I think, been implemented. And that is use proven technology. Don't think you're unique and you have to have your own. Get the right people to manage the system, and then make sure that you're doing it in pieces so that you don't get caught up in everything. I just want you to know, I listened to that lesson.
So you're comfortable with this approach, you're reflecting on previous.
I'm reflecting on all the problems that we had, and DMV had a failed project, a huge one.
So when was that? So
Oh, boy, at least, Robbie it was back when he was commissioner.
was
So-
it part of trying to modernize the system that
Yeah,
was
it
there?
was, but it was a very large, and it was everybody's wish list, and they put people on that didn't have the expertise. Everything that causes a problem of project to fail was at work there. The same was true with judiciary, and it had also another IT system that was not successful. And I believe there was a third, well, the other big debacle was, of course, the market exchange, for healthcare.
There's that school of finance, that's probably a smaller bubble where the accounting program that we required all the schools to.
Oh, that was their, yes, that was their procurement. That was another.
Exchange was a lot of millions. That
It
was.
was, yeah, it was. So we're trying to learn the lessons from the past and not repeat them. But I'm sure that's what you instructors do these two.
So I was gonna say, so we're too small to be bleeding edge, and that we can't absorb failure of custom solutions because there's so many economies of scale.
No, we
So
don't.
it's nice to find a proven track, a path, not an off-the-shelf solution, but this is like an off-the-shelf process, it sounds like, with some. Yeah,
Oh.
great.
And I think sadly, the bleeding edge is success in some of these projects because they don't always happen.
It's gonna be leading edge, but not bleeding.
So when I do a review, I focus on the same areas across projects. So when you do see reviews from me, that you can compare different projects to see how I rated those. So that's really what this is. So these are the important findings from my review, which was completed last spring. The fact that the DMV system will replace a 50-year-old mainframe, 20 desktops, a bunch of manual process. The fact that the system's been successfully implemented in 17 other states on time and on budget, which is unheard of. And the fact that Commissioner Manoli refers to this as transformational, but I think that's an understatement. Again, as you mentioned, Senator Kitchell, one of the key challenges is you're not just replacing a system, you're changing how the Department of Motor Vehicles operates. It's a huge business process engineering that's taken place. And also the fact that this system was comparable to other implementations in other states. And the total is around, I say around 102 million, because I know another chunk of money which wasn't associated with the cost of this project, which I think should have been, which was the cost to hire other employees to backfill while the agency was implementing the system. And I'll get to that later. But I think we have to be wary of and on the lookout for those types of additional costs that aren't necessarily associated with the project, but I think should be.
Well, we're very conscious of that because the funding for these IT, for the hiring, the contractor stuff is being done out of ADS. But separate apart is the cost to the department to backfill, because if you're gonna take most experienced staff and assign them to a project, then you've got to backfill with additional positions to do that work. So, and that stays within the department. So those of us in appropriations have been having this conversation about what is, you know, the IT, the pure, and the contract review and the vendor and all that, and then how much is actually influencing your operational cost at the internally. And those costs have to be recognized as well, and we have to budget for them.
Absolutely, and it's a battle because I know there's, for the state ERP project, which is human resources, the finance project, there, right now, there's a RFP out there from the administration to do business process reengineering associated with that, but I hadn't heard about that as being associated with the cost of that project. So, you know, we have to be continually to be on the lookout for those associated costs to support.
So a 50-year-old mainframe computer is gonna be just about unheard of.
Oh, no, no,
I wish, there's still one over at AHS, isn't there?
yes, there is.
You know, what's the shelf life of this new system that comes in? Is it indefinite because of the modernization of how much has changed in 50 years?
Well, I think what you're seeing is a trend in state, which I definitely support, which is really a subscription model. So they're not buying software that they're installing locally on service. Really, it's a hosted vendor application. And so the goal is that to eliminate the needs for all of these upgrades because they're kind of part of the project. There are others that are kind of more seamless, like the proposed ERP system, the Workday, which really is subscription. They keep it up to date and they don't deviate. This one, I know the agency, the department is purchasing really I refer to it as concierge support, which means whenever they're doing an upgrade, they're actually on site helping staff understand what the new changes are. And I think for a state like ours, that makes a lot of sense because it's too hard to manage all these disparate systems and have.
So the upgrades work almost like an Apple iPhone, I mean, in a simplistic way, that as.
With your updates.
Yeah, with your updates and stuff, I mean, it's.
We're paying for that service, yes. I think the Workday ERP system is going to be more like that because they're upgraded like 3 times a year and it's more seamless than something like this.
Yes, Senator Chip.
I'd also argue that compared to what we designed 50 years ago, this platform is going to better detach and separate the data management from the application interfaces, which will make it much more migratable in the future. So I think, to your point, I don't think this is going to be one and done. It's going to last us 100 years, but I think that
Constantly.
the new technologies, I think, will be easier to monitor, to upgrade and have upgrade.
I'm wondering, like, when you look at a 50-year-old mainframe, you look at it, it's probably pretty similar to what it was 50 years ago with, you know, so obviously some upgrades on it, but I don't even know in this time frame if this thing lasted that long, if you would even recognize what you started with to what you ended with.
Well, the big problem is there are very few people that know COBOL. It's antiquated, and the Agency of Human Services system is on a software, and so these old mainframes, don't kid yourself, they've been workhorses and they've served us well. 50 years on a system, and the AHS system, we're really talking about the eligibility processing system, has supported multiple programs and disbursements and stuff in a very predictable way, but it's old in the technology, and you don't have the people that know the codes anymore, or you have to develop them. So that's the other big modernization project.
When does this new system kick in?
I have the
Oh, yeah,
dates up
you
here. Yeah. Okay. So this was just the ratings. Everything was strong or excellent in the areas that I looked at, except for the organizational support. And the only reason that was neutral was because they hadn't been funded at that point, so they hadn't assigned a full project team. It's going great. So the other things I identified when I do a review is risks moving forward. So what am I going to look at? What are the key risks per system? And these will probably look also familiar to you. Have stakeholders been engaged? I mean, that's very often when you all first hear that a project's not going well from your constituents and stakeholders. The data migration. Now, when you're talking some of these really old systems, they didn't have the business rules included in them that allowed the data to be completely clean. So sometimes the migrations can be a bit rocky because you're trying to put dirty data into a new system that actually checks for dirty data. So sometimes there's a lot of data cleaning efforts that go on, or you're making those calls. What data am I actually moving in and what am I going to store external? So maybe people that haven't been licensed in the last 20 years, you're not going to include them in the system, for example. And also how are system integrations going? So with this system, they're integrating into the state financial system, with the dealer systems. I know you mentioned with some town clerks, I'm not sure if that was in the scope of it or not. But all of these are complexities that we're looking at. And then I'm always looking for the other things that come up as the project's going through the paces, identified by the project team, et cetera. So when I'm monitoring projects, I have a great relationship, especially with ADS at this point. They set up so I can access the site that their project management teams use. So I can go at any given time and look at the updated status report. So they've been really great, really transparent. I just looked at this status report this morning because it came out yesterday. It comes out once a week, and they're doing great. I mean, I think the current risks are they're trying to figure out where the titles will actually be printed for desks. Do they have to order printers? So it's really, kind of things that are deep down, but nothing of a concern. I know at some point they're going to change a bank, so they need to figure out when they're going to make that decision to change. But everything with this project is going green.
It's not really technical.
Well,
Thank you.
they impact.
I'm sure it's a love note.
It impacts when a certain bit of work could be done.
Right.
And
yeah.
So,
but those are more, I don't know, to me, those are kind of decisions that impact, but they're not part of your design features or your specifications. If you're gonna have a bay, what will it be?
which one? So I can make sure when we go live, it's all set to go and we're able to test it. So I've seen nothing of concern on these. The biggest concern I saw was early on when they were having a supply chain issue. So some equipment that they needed was late coming in for no fault of their own, but that was resolved quickly without impacting the timeline. So my current status assessment of this is it's in excellent shape. I did look at they invited me to a presentation with their vehicle services people, so the dealers were on to look at the system and make the first look at what it would look like. Their plan is to start testing this in May 2023, so that's coming up. And their go live date for this phase is November. And driver services, it's still early, but they hope to conclude by July 2025. So they're moving right along. I've set up a meeting with them the end of March because I wanted it to be close enough to when they were going into testing to identify any problems, but also as they're gearing up for phase 2. Because on this one, I really I'm hoping I can snag an invite to their kickoff meeting for because I really want to understand what makes this company different for the sake of informing how we do other projects. So, and they'll go through their methodology for implementing systems because they have a great track record.
What's the name?
Fast. They also did the tax system overhaul, which was seamless too.
That went well. That was a good, successful project.
And motor vehicles actually had one related to vehicle taxes that Fast did. So that was their first interaction. And Commissioner Minoli had mentioned that she was so skeptical on that first project because she really wanted it to go well. So she was deeply involved. And after that, when she saw how they approached their project, she definitely had a level of comfort in trusting their advice and what they had been through in other states and really adapting to the methodology. And so this is this piece was the other associated project costs, which was 1.1 million for the temporary limited services positions to backfill things. So when I talk about this project, I think about the things that really seem to set it up for success. One is the vendor experience and their own success and track record. And the big one is Commissioner Minoli and having the leadership that is willing to really drive this home. And because it's hard to implement change like this in an organization where you're changing everything, the way that it's been done for 50 years. And that takes a lot. And early on, she had already started reclassifying employees based on what their new roles would be and trying to get the people that would be responsible for managing the system moving forward involved in the implementation so they could see how their team needed to change. So a lot of the change management things are really a credit. And then the other thing is if you didn't have a really good project team, a really strong project manager on the state side as well, this could be a problem. Kelly Nolan. Yeah, so you have good people on the state side as well. So it's really well thought out and well staffed. And I don't want to brush over how important that is.
When the old system continues until the day the new system kicks in.
Goes live, yeah.
So it's all happening at one time.
For the cutoff, what they do is they have separate systems. So they have a development system that they're developing on. So as they're implementing a system, people on the project team can look at it and say, yeah, that looks right, or so they understand it from the ground up. And then they have a test system. So then once all the development is done, they move it to test. And then everybody hits it with tests, with all their test scenarios, et cetera. They probably are looking at the data that's migrated over. Does it match what's in the system that we migrated, et cetera, all of that testing. And then you have the go live. So once you go through all of that, then you have a switch where you move the application with all its fixes over into the live environment and then move the data over and then you
So
flip the
there's a lot of
switch.
training of the employees. That takes a big process.
Yeah, there's a lot of training, but that's all part of their rollout.
You have to be the same system forever and all of a sudden you go to a new one.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And
The other thing that's really critical is when you do the switchovers, you've got a lot of technical support because then people are going to have questions or how does this work or I can't do this. And it's very frustrating that if you can't get kind of an immediate assistance, so that help function is going to be really important.
You might be getting to this in your slide, but as I look at large projects like this, I always like to evaluate risk and I like to compartmentalize it. It seems like we've addressed the technical risk by using FAST, a proven entity. We're addressing the legal risk with the DMV bill, giving some proposed flexibility. Operational and scheduling, I think we've got a nice phase 2-year plan going in. Economical risk, the money seems to be there. I think the political risks is resolved. I don't hear any up and start with somebody challenging Governor Scott and wasting money on the DMV, so that's not how they.
Well, that's been an issue for 100 years, this DMV thing.
But my big concern is what Senator Kitchell just touched on, the cultural risk. So that's what you're trying to size up, is that the DMV and all the different parts of the organization are ready and excited about this transition.
well, are they being set up to deliver that? And is it being put out there as this is how it's going to be done and giving people input as they're working on the project itself to have some impact on because half of it is really understanding why it is a certain way. Just like when you're implementing a system and you really want to bring staff along, doing a needs assessment, requirements, it's just as much for the staff as it is for the system because they're understanding all of the complexities that are there and why the solution can deliver on that. So all of those pieces seem to be in place. And this is, I was talking to Sean Mailer about this, and we were talking about how important leadership was on this particular project. And he said such a Vermonter thing. He said, have you ever been to the Tunbridge Bridge World's Fair Oxbow? And I'm like, yes. And he said, well, you know how you have some, they're screaming at the ox, pull. Then you have some and they're whipping the ox. Then you have the drivers that are out there with the ox pushing. He says, that's Commissioner Minoli. So I thought that was great. But because she really is, she's really committed to this, and it's been great to see.
Because it's been a long time in the works, right, James?
Well, it has, and I remember years ago, actually, the AHS system was so old, we didn't have internet. They were dumb terminals that were feeding the data into the mainframe. And everybody was concerned about buying too much technology. And so workers were supposed to share the same computer. And within a week, they're saying, that's like asking us to share a pencil because we have to have that available routinely to do our work. So sometimes you can do something that do you want to over purchase? And then sometimes you discover you've under purchased. And so I remember that very much. It's like asking me to share my pencil. And so I think that's hard. And then once you get that experience or know something maybe needs to be recalibrated.
She still uses, she got a pencil.
I've been sharing that pencil.
Right, and so I can erase the numbers.
Can you share your pencil with me or what?
No,
Okay. There, that was
No.
that.
no, I need that now. So, I mean, I'm just saying, it's really important to be nimble or very quick in responding to something, so, and you try to anticipate everything, but it
Something
really
comes up.
doesn't happen.
Because we're all human beings,
Yeah.
but this has been great. And I think the other danger on some of this is you have state employees who really are thrifty and they want to save the state money, but sometimes they get you into trouble. I know with the AHS system, they made a real effort during the pandemic to really open up services via a portal so constituent clients could apply from home for things that normally they had to go into an office for. But in the background, and that looks great and that is great, but in the background, you have people at AHS who take the data that was entered into that and can't enter it into the old system because they couldn't do that connection because the system's too old. And so at some point you have to say, well, that's not sustainable. So
What is the most amazing thing that's gone on in 50 years in this business? I mean, most amazing, is it storage of data or what is it?
Your iPhone that
Yeah.
probably has as
Yeah.
much computing power.
Well, it is. I
And they
mean,
all-
it's amazing.
they all add risk as you go.
Yeah.
I think the cloud is the
Yeah,
most
That's what I
important.
was thinking too.
Just
Yeah.
because all the things that you used to have to worry about in managing servers and hiring the people to manage those servers,
Yeah.
that's what I really struggled with.
That's
you know, I-
seamless, the cloud is like, it's just there and it's just.
Yeah, and you can count on, it switching over when you have peak capacity if you're set up for that, that it's backed up in multiple places. It's like turning on the lights, you know what I mean? Like you count on it as being there, you don't worry about how it works when you're at home, right? It's just there. And I think the cloud is the biggest, and also moving over to more subscription-based.
Russ, if there's no
Systems.
clouds, that means there's nothing up there.
They say nothing about me, so there's nothing there.
It's like a computer bank in the sky.
And what is coming? What is coming that isn't there yet that we're gonna see, that we're, they're saying, oh boy, we just gotta develop more.
If I knew,
Yeah,
I'd be-
there you go.
I'd be buying
There
stock.
you go, there you go.
I think the big question is, the big concern is artificial intelligence. and
Yeah.
how-
Yeah.
how they innovate.
Yeah.
well,
But I definitely, I agree. AI is going to have some great applications. And Michelle Blumenauer already sent something about how DMV can start using it for both translation services and it's also for just any tech problems. But the one thing I think the state, to your point, Senator Hills, and I want to credit Jim Fondos for doing great work in the Secretary of State space, but I see an opportunity for more integrated authentication across all the different platforms. So when you have a DMV system and you register for all your DMV things, I think that should also apply for your state taxes and also for your campaign filings or your business registration. So I'd like to see more unification across every place where we have our citizens interact with the state should have sort of more a unified portal where they can see it all rather than all these disparate systems.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder when you sit here and you listen to, oh, that system over there, oh, why aren't they all the same? Why aren't we just,
You can be separate, you can create portals, like UVM's done a really good job by integrating multiple interfaces to systems through one portal.
It's just the functions of government are so much diverse. Higher ed is higher ed, but you look at the scope of, and people get really nervous about the exchange of data. And some-
Yeah, everybody's so protective, right?
Well, obviously there's some data particularly around, say, child welfare or sometimes juvenile case. So you've got to make sure that you are identifying data that you're willing to have available across systems.
And the security that you must have built into this, or it must be built into this, it's just gonna be just awesome. It's just,
yeah, I mean.
you think of all the people in the world that are trying to cause havoc and.
Well, the nice thing is tax information and tax systems are so sensitive. And this company obviously has got expertise in that area as well.
And ADS did invest in more security monitoring tools that were funded last year to monitor that. And hearing the CIO Naylor really speak to how many attacks they've had and reported over the last year is just incredible. So,
Yeah, we funded more software. We also funded, Norwich is doing,
that's right.
there's a partnership with Norwich and they are monitoring all the time the system.
A few years ago, did we start down this road? We lost a lot of money when we started this program with DMV.
Oh,
We had
yeah.
a contractor, we spent a lot
The
of
contract, right, the contractor, it kept getting sold.
money.
And it started with Hewlett Packard, I think, has moved on. And so, no, remember, they ended up paying the state back.
Right, yeah,
But it was,
because this was quite a few years ago, we started this and then we.
That was
held
around
back.
2004, I think.
Yeah, it was a big disappointment because it was gonna crash back then, but and all of a sudden that.
no, these old systems soldier on until you can replace
I
them,
don't know how they ever
Well,
lasted.
sort of.
I think we probably need to look at what else is left other than at AHS and elsewhere that really we need to inundate on.
Because the DMV has changed so many policies online now. You do all this stuff, you license inspections, I mean, not inspections, but everything has changed so much. Where
Yeah.
DMV years ago, you went to the office, you did your business, and now that's all gone.
It was kind of the rite of passage, right?
Oh, yeah. it's just
You know, you
gone.
learn more about life in the DMV.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they do more transactions than
Remember.
thousands and thousands.
And the ease of what it is, I can remember just getting ready to go hunting or fishing and you didn't have a license. It was on a Sunday and you had to go bother the town clerk and issue the license. And now you just get online and 5 minutes you're done and print it off, you put it in your wallet and away you go. Just
Yeah, I did a notary the other day, because I'm a notary, you have to go, I took a test,
Yeah.
you do it, then they print your license and everything, and the whole thing was done, it's just amazing, yeah.
I like that test.
That was a long test, it was a long test, it was over an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Supposed to be a notary.
To be a notary.
Yeah, I heard they made it a little tougher.
Oh, yeah, my daughter, she set it up for me and everything, but it was, you
She
could
took the test for you.
Well,
What committee?
Left me alone.
What's your morning committee?
And anyway, it was, it could be a 2-hour test or an hour and a half, you pass it, you had to pass, you had to get 70 or something. And so I passed the test, but it was a long sitting there doing it, so the notaries just apply, you got your, now I can't get my liquor and beer license this year, you have to go on and do all that again, you can't do it, you can't send a check to town,
Yeah.
that's all done now. You don't see
you have to
anybody.
take a test?
Well, yeah, we have to take to sell alcohol, but the license, you don't have, but I have to take, if I'm just gonna sell it every 2 years, all the employees have to do it, which is good. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's so different than it was here. Like I said, now to get my beer license, you've got to do everything online. There's nothing, you can't, I used to send a check to the liquor control, but that's all done.
They don't want checks. Actually, the banks discourage check. They really like
Yeah.
electronic fund transfer. And that's why checks are so expensive to buy now, like $35 now for, so it really discourages.
I haven't seen a check for Christmas. Somebody caught me on Christmas Eve for 2 bad checks. Because we don't take checks at the store. We have a list of people we take them from. But the guy must have known he come on a busy day and he hit us twice and lost over $150. But the checks are obsolete. Nobody uses it. The elderly people still have checks. But,
Yeah, like me.
I like me.
Yeah, checks.
Like me, everything.
I do have checks, I don't use them.
No, I don't either, because it's a lot easier to set up automatic payment.
We use a lot in business with checks still, trusted.
I want to see what, before I pay my bill, I want to see it. I don't like this automatic payment.
What?
So Lisa, how many other IT projects are you monitoring?
Boy, good question. 5 or 6. It's sort of bumping up because we have Judiciary Network
There's a lot going on.
and I'm
You're the only person.
only part-time too.
It's
Yeah.
on it as need, as
Yeah.
at work.
Here's the
Contract
rate.
basis.
Yeah.
So judiciaries, that's the network.
The network.
problem. This is something that we've got to.
Did labor fix their problem?
That's up for RFP right now. That's a difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just closing thoughts, I want to pick up on some, one comment made about how these systems last for so long. They last because of what you spoke about, which is they create these shadow systems, these very inefficient manual systems. That's what those 20 desktop applications
Yeah.
are. And so this will streamline that, and I think it'll make everybody's job easier. It's just the transition that I'm worried about.
Yes.
And I could go through battle stories about you at UVM.
Well, UVM, they don't, the people that teach there don't have to be there anymore. They don't even know where they are.
Virtual, you're a virtual
They get
teacher.
their check in the mail.
Yeah.
What you can do.
Artificial intelligence.
Automatically. There are people that work there that don't even show up there.
Artificial intelligence.
They're on a payroll.
What it's not mentioning UVM, but I've been involved with some major projects at UVM, and I just want to emphasize how important executive level, commissioner level support is for these projects. If Wanda Manoli wasn't a champion for this thing, this would die on the vine. So I just appreciate her leadership in that. It's critical.
She's supposed to be here this
Agreed.
morning and she didn't show up, so.
Well, and also assembling the team that is working day to day and making sure you've got the right talent and the experience to,
I've seen really good ideas get through because of executive leadership, really good ideas not get through because there just wasn't a champion in the boardroom advocating for it in the budget. And I've seen really bad ideas get through because they did have a champion. So we need that champion.
Who's championing for you?
Trying.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I just want to say,
Thank you.
in support of Commissioner Manoli, I saw us both on the agenda. I did contact her, and she said, don't they want to hear from just you and have like you?
Well, I wanted her to be here so she could hear nice
And
things
so
about
I
herself.
know,
You know
and
what I mean?
I told her, if you don't want to
But,
be here to bask in all the,
Usually we
success.
beat her up a little bit, so now she's there on a good thing.
Learning.
no, she's been very,
No, she's been great to work
very
with.
helpful
Yeah.
and very transparent with providing
Great.
information to me.
Sounds like you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, all right.
well, we'll still have to figure out the judiciary issue.
There's a lot going on.
Well, when the system goes down,
Yes,
and shuts down the court for a day, that's a real problem.
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
It's
thank
nice
you.
to meet you all.
Thank you, very
We're
nice.
just gonna take a brief moment to do those confirmations. If you don't mind, we'll do one. We're gonna ask one to commit, is that correct? We're gonna ask the Transportation Board, Mark Nicholson, is that correct? We're gonna have him call in or set up a time.
Or Zoom
But
in.
the other ones, Francis Heel, Elizabeth Kenneth, and John Labarge. Do we want to do those? Or you want to hear from them? They're all reappointments.
I just assume support their
Okay.
reappointment.
Okay, so those three,
It chairs that council. What is it, the recreation, what is it?
it's the Travel Information Council, recreation member, Travel Information Council for a term. It doesn't say, recreation member. One is an agriculture member, Travel Information Council. Doesn't say about that, and travel, they're all just members, doesn't say who's chair.
Of the transportation.
John Kessler is the person in traffic.
We've got
John Kessler is for the,
the first one we're gonna have in, or not, or call in.
John Kessler is the Travel Information Counselor. Head.
Right.
I think I'm surprised we have to do these appointments.
Well, I mean, it's a double check.
No, I know,
That, so,
no. I would move that we approve
Those three.
the reappointment of the three members to the Travel Information Council,
Okay,
and that we, and then we can.
Okay. who's the clerk? There's some here.
It's a clerk.
Okay, do that.
So I'll make the motion to recommend reappointment of Francis Heel, Elizabeth Kennett, and John Labarge to the Travel Information Council.
Do we need to vote
We'll
it?
give you the, okay, that we have a motion, someone seconded. All those in
We have
favor?
You have to call the roll.
Call the roll. Okay.
Okay,
Senate Finance has been just doing, but I'm fine with the rules.
Okay.
I think you have to put the vote in on the back of the calendar.
do we have a vote sheet, Mike?
I don't have one made us.
Okay.
Well, then they would just.
Okay, Senator Ingalls.
Yep, so we're gonna move on the motion made by Senator Kitchell to confirm all three.
We'll give you the paper.
Yeah, I'll say it.
Just give it to,
We want to do them all together or do we want to do them separately?
I'll do them all together.
Okay.
Recommend,
Yeah.
we recommend
I'll give
reappointment
it back to you, Senator.
of the three individuals, Elizabeth Bennett.
So,
set up a time.
okay, so motion's been made that Francis,
We recommend because it's,
Francis Heels, is it Heels?
yes,
Elizabeth Kennett and John LaBerge be
reappointed.
reappointed. And Senator Kitchell,
And the second was Andy. Andy seconded my motion, I believe.
okay, second, okay, so. And we'll do this, and so calling the roll, Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Senator Chipman,
Yes.
Senator Ingles is yes, Senator Perchlik,
Yes.
and Senator Mazza.
Yes,
Okay, so.
And those don't even get
no,
reported.
they don't get reported,
They
they just on
just,
the
they
calendar.
get put in the back.
Okay. Yes,
For the record, I worked 14 hours yesterday at UVM and I'm working Thursday night. I've got to this session.
well, I hope you put a few hours in, I mean, it's nice that you spent a few hours.
Whoops, you got the wrong, a lot, but the wrong name, the names of the members on there, Mike, sorry.
All my teaching.
Is that the old?
Colin Warren Star. and stuff.
Mike, you don't know who the members are? Maybe I do.
No problem.
Apparently it's been there for a while.
Yeah. Alamar down transportation.
No,
Yeah.
it was, must be some other committee or maybe judicial nominating or something.
He's been on that. He's on that.
No, it's probably what it was ag.
Hey,
We kicked you right into
Yes,
Old Thirty,
yes.
so we should go off.
Then we're gonna hear about the big trail in someone's district.
I know, it's like, and then the drawbridge.
Oh, that's what I want to hear about.
We haven't heard enough about